Hey everyone, welcome to day 6. Week 6, day 3. And we're going with our weekly theme of keys. So Monday, we did a super high key painting of Danny, just a blown out flash with like this tiny bit of contrast up in her hair and her bun. And yesterday, we did a painting of Manu that was very nice. It was a medium to light tone, actually kind of washing, through the background and up her face, while the dogs we're gonna let the dogs bark a little bit. Okay, that's good. So that midtone was actually affecting, the background, and the background was kind of swallowing up her face and her hands. And then we had an area of contrast with her blue shirt. It was not only contrast through value, it was contrast through complementary, through hues. And today we're gonna see what else we can do while manipulating areas of values within the painting. So let's get to it. This is still Yupo paper. I'm very much liking it. I don't think it's the easiest paper. It's weird calling it paper. It is a plastic sheet. But let's call it Yupo paper. It's still pretty hard to work on. I really don't think I would recommend it for people that are just starting out to paint in oils. So just be mindful of that. Manipulating the paint on this very slippery layer, it's difficult. You almost have to know what to expect of painting. So if you're just starting out and you want to start painting on paper, just prime thick watercolor paper and you'll be perfectly fine. Any pad that has watercolor paper or any paper that is already prepped for oil. I know Arches has an oil paper. That will be perfectly fine. Today, honestly, I just wanted to have a painting that would give me a chance to talk a little bit about one of my favorite painters of all time, Olga Boznańska. She's an amazing Polish painter that I have to say I discovered by complete accident. I wish I could say that I knew about her before and that, I spent my whole life just trying to have people that didn't know about her to get close to her work. But the truth is, when I was younger, I had a show in Bogota that I did really well. It sold out. And my one idea with the money that I have was to spend all that money on a trip through Europe. This wasn't just going to be a backpacking trip. This was actually going to be a trip where I wanted to just go after paintings that I had seen all my life, reproduced in books, and at that moment in very, very low res photos on the internet, and I just wanted to see them firsthand. So I took a really long trip through Europe. And I was going to go to Poland because when I was in the Vatican years before, I was just walking like most of the people walk. It's almost like a herd with just people yelling at you to, just go quickly and advance, just so you can get to the Sistine Chapel. That's what's very sad about the Vatican, that there are paintings in the Vatican collection that are magnificent, but they just want to get to that. It's akin to people just flocking to the Mona Lisa at the Louvre. And I remember walking in a hall, and it's still a very narrow hallway. And suddenly there's this enormous painting, which I later read that is actually the biggest painting owned by the Vatican. And I was like, what is this? This is absolutely incredible. And I was like, this is a Polish painter, but I knew nothing about Polish painting. And it was Jan Matejko. And I immediately bought the one book in the Vatican that had any mention of that painting. It had like a little close-up of that painting. And the most frustrating thing about this painting is that because it is a narrow hallway and because it is such a large painting, you can barely see this painting. You're so close that it has windows right in front of it, so it glares like crazy, and you literally have to look up at the painting so you never have an idea of what the actual painting looks like the whole of the painting looks like. So it's very, very sad. But when I saw that painting, I was like, I have to. It's almost like a procession. I have to go to Poland to see more of this painter. And, years went by and I started just gathering information in Matejko. And I realized, oh my God, one of the paintings that I've found throughout, I don't know, life, I don't remember where I saw that painting first, was also another Polish painter, which was Jacek Malszewski. And Malszewski has a bunch of paintings that are absolutely fascinating. He would fit into what I guess history has called symbolist painters, but symbolism wasn't really a movement. It was just like a nice way to group a bunch of painters through Europe that were painting in somewhat of a similar fashion, as opposed to Matejko, who was a historical painter. But then I thought, wow, I could go to Warsaw, I could go to Poznan, and I could go to Krakow and see a bunch of work from these two painters. And that was my plan. And finally I get to Poland, and it was very hard because nobody spoke English. At that point, I was in a hotel that was kind of nice in Warsaw, I remember it, and some people spoke English. But it was very, very hard for me, that trip, I remember. But all I wanted was to see these paintings. And I walked, and I had to walk. I was staying at a hotel that was pretty far. So every day I would have to walk about an hour and a half to the Warsaw National Museum. Obviously, I went straight for the huge Matejko painting, the Grunewald battle. And I remember just staring at it, just, oh my God, it was glorious. It was like dream come true. I had the highest of expectations, and when I saw the painting, I was like, poof, my mind just blew up. But, the National Museum in Warsaw is huge, and I was like, well, I'm going to check other painters. So I started to walk the halls, and I saw painters that I had never, ever heard of. Never heard of these painters. And I was like, oh my God, why has this been kept from us? Like, this is insane. I remember first looking at Josef Brandt's, one of the horse paintings, and I was like, these are some of the coolest horses. And I had seen like Meissonier's horses, or Rosa Bonheur's horses at the Met. And, I had seen really cool horses. But then I saw Brandt's horses, and I was like, this is insane. These are probably the most energetic horses that I've ever seen painted, like better than Remington's. And suddenly I found, and this is the moment that changed my life, I saw this painter, Olga Boznańska, that, again, I had never, ever seen or read or heard or mentioned in any art conversation in my life, not my teachers, nobody. And I saw her, and I was like, are you kidding me? This is like one of the purest forms of painting that I've ever seen. And it had to do with everything, just the way she depicted herself, just the brushstrokes, the values that she decided to paint, with, and the surface that she painted on. I had seen Toulouse-Lautrec's, and we've mentioned that before, painting on cardboard, and they felt sketchy and they felt very European. It was just this this French painter just sketching on cardboard at Moulin Rouge, and that was that it was exactly as what you could imagine from just describing that. It's exactly that. But Boznańska was painting on cardboard, and there was this sense of not caring at all about it being cardboard, and there was this feeling of there's not even medium, there's nothing, it's just paint that the cardboard has sucked up. And I don't know, saturation of the color had probably died down. The color was probably degrading. The surface is degrading, I'm sure. For Polish restorers that care about her work, I'm sure it's a nightmare. But I loved it as is. I was like, this is perfect. This is perfection. And if I live to be 50 years older than what I am right now, I'm sure that in 50 years that those paintings have been degrading even more, I'll still love it. And if I could live 200 years from now, and I'm sure those paintings would slightly begin to disappear, I would be, in love with them. So I think this is one of those things that is eternal for me. I haven't gone back since, which is crazy because I should just to look at her work again. But I actually love the fact that the imprint that first moment that I saw her without knowing anything about her left on me. And she is perfect for this week because she does every single thing that has moved me about value. You know, if I try to dissect her painting, which is ridiculous, but if I try to understand what she's doing, it's an absolute masterful control of value. And she decides to work on midtones, and she decides to paint accents in little tiny areas that she hits because she's an incredible draftsman, that she hits perfectly. So whenever she kind of grounds her painting on an eye or a nostril or a mouth or just a cast shadow of a finger on top of another finger where all the fingers are interlaced, she does it perfectly. It's like spot on perfection. And when I saw that immediately, I was just, I don't know if it happens to you guys, but, and it doesn't have to be with her. You know, maybe I'm describing her and everyone goes to see her work and you go like, I don't really like it that much. But I'm sure this happens with some other painter for you guys. But for me, it was her. And now that I understand her more contextually, she was a Polish painter when she was younger. She went to Munich to study art. But she was only studying at an academy that would accept women. At that point, this was early, I think this was late 19th century. There was, a bunch of academies, of bigger academies, didn't accept women. And she studied in the smaller academy, which was for women. Then she became sort of well known as a portrait painter. And eventually she moved to France. This is post-war. Everybody is just struggling. Artists even more so. She was dirt poor. She just painted, her portraits, her self-portraits, little still lifes on cardboard. She could care less about technique. She knew a lot about technique, but she could care less about technique. And it's just one of the rawest, purest form of painting that I've ever encountered in my life. Ever. If I have to just try to remember times that has happened, it was with her, with Olga Boznańska, when I made that trip. And it was the first time I saw Benjamin Bjorklund doing a watercolor. It just felt different than everyone else. I don't care if there's better watercolorist than Benjamin. Benjamin's work is above everyone else's I've seen in my life. And it's so rare to encounter that when you see it, you just want to treasure it. You just want to say, just let her be. In the case of Olga Boznańska, let her be. This is just, this doesn't happen often. Because usually when we study things, it also kind of ruins a part of us. Because we can't unlearn things, or we have to spend our whole life unlearning things. And with her, it just felt that she was able to tap in for some reason in her life to just letting go and just painting exactly the way she wanted to paint. Exactly the way she wanted to paint. And the lessons that I took from her, because I can't paint like her. She is, and I really, really don't like to speak about women painters as if they were a different, of a different breed. I, of course, accept and contextualize all the, hardships that a woman had to go through to try and get an art education. And the fact that they were revered as great painters, like they should be. But the fact that they got any recognition was just, they probably had to work 100 times harder than any man working in the 19th century. I completely understand that. But when I look, at painting, at the wholeness of painting, she's not just one of the best 19th century painters. I think she's one of the best painters in history. Period. For me, it's the impact was so profound, so deep. I don't even want to categorize it. I don't want to say, oh, she's one of the best portrait painters in art history. I think she's one of the best painters in history. I really, really do. So for me, when you have such a life-changing, life-altering moment, you have to let everything settle down and say, okay, what is it that I like about her? Because I can't paint like one of the best painters in history. I can't. She is extraordinary, which means she is out of the ordinary. I am an ordinary, hardworking painter, but she is somebody who is different, who is blessed, who just worked her, heart out. But she is very, very different, and we should celebrate that. Even though we can accept that there's a huge space between us and them and those extraordinary people, we still can learn from them. One of the things that I loved about her work, and I still do every time I see it, is just character. There is so much character in her painting. It's not this painting that is subjected to the patron's gaze, looking back at you, knowing that you have the responsibility of painting the best version of this sitter. I don't think her portraits, even the ones that were of people that commissioned her portraits, feel that way. You get a feeling of her first in her portraits rather than her sitter, which is fantastic. And I think it's the way it should be. I think nowadays people are way too subjected to the sitter, and they forget about themselves as artists. And the second thing was this acceptance of the impermanent, imperfect, incomplete nature of painting. It was just this complete acceptance and just letting go. And through acceptance, then you just, kind of revel in the fact that you can do so much if you let go. Nowadays, I can find some similarities of her, let's say, with Anne Gale. She has a very, very thoughtful, deep, it has the same weight as the one I feel with Boznańska when Anne Gale is doing her portraits that I'm sure take, months to do because she's also working from life. Not being a slave to technique, to history, to tradition, understanding where you come from, yes. So celebrating tradition, but then saying, I'm just not going to be one that follows all these preconceptions of what painting should look like. And I'm just going to do my own sort of melancholic painting. And I'm going to show myself in every single painting that I paint. I'm going to make myself palpable. Observers 100 years later are going to feel me as a human being behind this painting. I think that's remarkable. And there are, I can think of 1,000 painters that probably paint better technically than her, but where I just feel respect for their ability, but I never feel the human being behind the painting. And with her, it was just this gut instinctual connection with another human being that painted, that poured her soul into a painting. And to pour your soul into a painting, and this is very important, you don't have to labor over something for 20 years. You don't have to paint for 30 years a single painting. And that level of commitment is the one that communicates how much you cared about something. You don't have to. Some of her portraits are sketches. Some of her portraits are probably alla prima, single sessions. But regardless, the nature that applies for a painting that has 5 layers of painting is the same one for a painting that was solved, with immediacy. And every time she painted, she could be sketching some flowers or she could be painting a formal portrait. The same result is visible. And it's that she is there. She left part of herself in there. And I don't think those are things that we see all the time when we look at painting. I think we see a ton of people concerned about making paintings, making nice paintings. And they anticipate this whole process in order to make a nice, eye-catchy painting. You can tell that was never her concern. Never, ever her concern. Today I wanted to celebrate that, and I wanted to do it in my own way. I'm painting Camilo, which is a former student of mine. And I'm sure he gives me like free reign to do whatever I want. So I obviously, I shifted a ton of his features. I don't care about symmetry. Just manipulated a ton of the shapes, pushed color in some areas. And in terms of what we're doing in this week's exercise, most of the background was kept in not the same value, but the shifts in value are just very, very small. And I wanted to have a little bit of saturation in the face, just the tiniest bit of saturation, and also tiny little accents with the features so that you could land your gaze in those moments and then everything else around it sort of dissolved. That's what we're trying to do this week, to try and manipulate values around our painting so that we as viewers can traverse the painting and land on areas that we think are interesting enough so that we can explore those areas. I hope you guys like it. I hope some of you become fans of Boznańska's work because I really do feel she is a gift to humanity as well as Benjamin. I love you, Benjamin. I think those are people that don't come along very often, and we should just let them be and celebrate them for what they are and not subject them to what art tells us that artists are supposed to be and how paintings are supposed to be done. We should just applaud that they exist. So that's it. I hope you guys like this one. Any chance I have to push somebody's character and have fun with a painting, I love. So today was a chance to do that. So thank you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.